everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Texas State Representative Ann Johnson, who also served as a chief human trafficking prosecutor. Representative, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be with you.
I'm really grateful for your expertise here in this conversation and your perspective because you are a human trafficking expert. Can you talk to us a little bit about your background there?
Certainly. Back in 2007, I was doing indigent defense work for children, and I got appointed to represent a 13-year-old little girl who was charged with prostitution in the state of Texas. I believed that was wrong. I believed that the state ought to be focusing on who were the people that were abusing that child and who were the individuals that were selling that child. And it took years to get that case to the Texas Supreme Court, but I am proud to tell the nation that the Texas Supreme Court got it right and said that child, BW, is a victim. And the focus of our policy should be to go after those that are exploiting the child. I then became the chief human trafficking prosecutor in Harris County around 2013 and had the honor of starting that division as one of the first individuals in Texas as a lawyer to actually prosecute and go after what I'm going to call this trifecta of folks involved in trafficking. You'll have an individual that sells a human being. You have an individual that is sold. But what we're really talking about here in these Epstein files is the demand, the buyers, the people that want to purchase, and how many people in trafficking think that they can get away with basic child abuse that we all find abhorrent, but they can get away from it simply because they offer money to a middleman to provide the child for their sexual pleasure. The Epstein files is about a lot more than just Epstein. It's about our nation recognizing that we will no longer tolerate this behavior and we will not allow the wealthy and the privileged to shield themselves from responsibility.
I do want to dive in and talk about what we've learned so far about the Epstein files and what was in them, because last month, the Department of Justice released over 3 million more materials related to the disgraced financier and convicted sex offender. And we all know about Jeffrey Epstein, right? He's a convicted sex offender, he's a pedophile, but what we're continuing to learn is just how deep the relationships he had with the rich and powerful and the well-connected all around the world. And the DOJ released these documents well past the December 19th date that the Epstein Files Transparency Act gave. But we're learning more now based on all these millions of documents. So to start off the conversation, from the perspective of someone who represented victims of sexual exploitation, what are some of your takeaways? And specifically, from your earlier point, what, if anything, are you learning about the buyers?
I mean, you absolutely have to give credit to the victims. And the fact that the victims are dogged and their requirement that there be transparency and exposure of the demand side, the buyers. They lived as victims, and oftentimes children are groomed into not only a situation where they can be abused, but oftentimes they think they did something wrong or they deserve it. I'm not surprised to see this group of victims who have now reached an age where they are mothers and they are now recognizing that it is up to them to protect the future children because they were not protected in that moment. And so now when you look back and look into the history of Epstein, the parties, the events, the island, the fact that there were rapists, there were abusers that were taking advantage of the fact that not only does it appear that Epstein is a pedophile, but he is a trafficker. He is in essence a pimp. He was supplying these young girls so that other men of power and privilege could abuse them, believing that it would continue to be shielded from the halls of Hollywood to government to Wall Street and worldwide. And so the fact that these victims today will not let it go and are trying to ensure that there is some level of transparency into who bought them, who abused them, and who were the other people around that effectively condoned it by not saying anything at the time. And so if we really are, as a nation, going to acknowledge that for a long time, people had it wrong. People thought boys will just be boys, that somehow this was acceptable behavior, that victims were shamed and groomed into believing that they had done something wrong and deserved the abuse that had happened to them. These women are a credit to not only righting this wrong, but ensuring that this powerful society does not attempt to continue to engage in it or engage in it in the future. And that's why we absolutely need some level of transparency we're not getting from the Trump Department of Justice.
I want to talk about how you think that investigation's going because, as I said earlier, over 3 million documents have been released so far. There's apparently 3 million more that are not being released. The Department of Justice said they're not releasing any more documents, but just this week, two lawmakers, it was a bipartisan duo, a Republican and a Democrat in the House, reviewed the unredacted files. And after that, the DOJ released the unredacted parts of a 2019 FBI document that listed 3 people as co-conspirators of Epstein's, one of them being Les Wexner, who is the former CEO of Victoria's Secret's parent company. And Ro Khanna, he's a congressman, one of them who reviewed the unredacted files. He said, if we found 6 men that they were hiding in 2 hours, imagine how many men they are covering up for in those 3 million files. What do you make of that, and what do you make of the redactions that you're seeing coming out of the DOJ?
Well, if you're going to redact a file, it is typically to protect the victim. You're looking for pseudonyms, you're looking for initials, and to protect the victim. But in this case, it's the victims that are being doxxed. It's the victims that are being put out there, and the perpetrators that seem to be getting redacted. Co-conspirator. Co-conspirator means somebody that is engaged in the criminal conduct of the trafficker. And so you would expect that those are the demand, the perpetrators, the buyers. And so you see this particular Department of Justice turning everything on its head, exposing the victims and protecting the perpetrators. And so I am grateful that this is a bipartisan congressional approach where you have 2 members of Congress who have had the backing of these women to say we're going to continue to push this issue, because these women are telling us that the most rich and powerful individuals, not only in the nation, but in the world, were engaged in this trafficking ring. And so at a time where everybody talks about wanting to protect victims of human trafficking, you can't do that here when you have the largest trafficking ring at the highest levels of power that are being and continue to be redacted, protected, and shielded by the Attorney General herself, Pam Bondi. And that hearing in which the victim stood and said, look at me. And she basically told the nation, don't look at them, look at the Dow. That is indicative of the entire corruption of which these powerful men think that they can get away with it because it has something to do with money. And so I am proud that the nation, I hope, has a resounding response that says, no, this is about actually healing the pain of the women who suffered this abuse. And you cannot distract us with the idea that somehow the Dow Jones is more important than protecting the integrity of the judiciary system.